Hello there, this is Jay Frost, and welcome to Frontlines of Social Good, the weekly news and views program from the Philanthropy Mastermind series. We're going to begin, as always, with the top 5 gifts of the week and this week's headlines. Then, during the program, we're going to be joined by 2 great guests. Harvey McKinnon, who will take us behind the scenes of the national campaign to save CBC Radio from devastating funding cuts in Canada. He'll share how the grassroots effort mobilized public support and what U.S. advocates for public media can take from Canada's playbook. Also, a conversation with George Weiner, chief whaler at Whole Whale, to unpack the abrupt cancellation of Microsoft's premium Office grants. For thousands of nonprofits, the loss of these essential tools is more than an inconvenience. It's a wake-up call for tech dependence, transparency, and who holds the power in the digital infrastructure of the sector. So, let's get started. And we'll start, of course, with the top 5 gifts of the week in reverse order. Number 5, $21 million to the University of Chicago from the Pritzker Foundation to launch the Quantum Engineering and Health Initiative at the Pritzker School of Molecular Engineering. This bold new center aims to harness the power of quantum science to revolutionize healthcare, advancing diagnostics, imaging, and precision therapies that could transform how we treat disease at the most fundamental level. Number 4, at the University of Virginia, 2 separate gifts of $25 million are set to expand both care and innovation. The first, from longtime supporters Paul and Diane Manning, will help fund a new tower focused on heart and vascular care. And the second, from an anonymous donor, will support patient-facing research to bring cutting-edge treatments directly to those who need them most. Together, these gifts are helping UVA Health move from excellence to even greater impact. Number 3, the government of Australia, through the PNG Australia Partnership, has committed nearly $26 million to eliminate cervical cancer across the Pacific. The funding will support vital health infrastructure, including vaccines, screening programs, and treatment services, with a special focus on Papua New Guinea. It's the largest single health investment of its kind in the region and a significant leap forward in women's health equity. Number 2, a historic $40 million gift from the Anna and John J. Tsai Foundation will establish the Tsai Vision Institute at the University of Colorado's Anschutz Medical Campus. The new institute will accelerate research and development of therapies for blinding eye diseases, including cutting-edge work in gene therapy and regenerative medicine. It's a powerful investment in the future of vision science with global implications. And number 1, topping the list this week, a $75 million gift to the African Medical Center of Excellence in Abuja, Nigeria. Backed by Afreximbank and its partners, the funding will seed an endowment to expand access to life-saving care and notably to subsidize treatment and support for research for potential cure for sickle cell disease. The center will also train a new generation of African medical professionals, helping to build a stronger, more equitable health system across the continent. Have we missed a big gift announcement this week? Almost certainly we have. Contact me directly and let me know about the gifts that are appearing in your world or that you've read about. You can do that directly through our sponsor, DonorSearch, or by my email address at DonorSearch, which is j@donorsearch.net, or via LinkedIn. Now, here are some of the most important stories shaping the nonprofit and philanthropic sector this week. A Minnesota nonprofit is at the center of what federal authorities are calling one of the largest pandemic-related fraud cases in the country. As reported by Yahoo News and the Star Tribune, the FBI raided the offices of Feeding Our Future, a St. Paul-based organization that was part of a program intended to feed children during COVID-19 school closures. Prosecutors allege that more than $250 million in federal child nutrition funds were diverted to shell companies, luxury purchases, and personal enrichment. Over 60 individuals have been charged so far. The scandal has reignited urgent conversations about fraud oversight, transparency, and the risks of rapidly scaling emergency nonprofit operations without adequate controls. A new report from Independent Sector, covered by Nonprofit Quarterly, sheds light on the growing pressures faced by nonprofit organizations nationwide. The survey found that more than half of nonprofits are still operating with fewer employees than they had before the pandemic, and nearly 70% report that burnout is a major concern. Many are being asked to do more with less, responding to rising community need while juggling staff shortages, unstable revenue, and systemic underinvestment. The report warns of a sector in perpetual crisis mode and calls for increased funding, policy reform, and meaningful investment in human capital to prevent long-term erosion of nonprofit capacity. Nonprofits engaged in advocacy are also under political fire, as many of you know from the House hearings just last week. According to Nonprofit Quarterly, a recent congressional hearing, again on the Hill, featured conservative lawmakers accusing nonprofits of political interference and misusing their tax-exempt status to sway elections. The hearing called into question the boundaries between nonprofit advocacy and partisanship, with some legislators proposing tougher IRS oversight and restrictions on donor privacy. Sector leaders have responded swiftly, warning that such rhetoric could undermine legitimate civic engagement and deter donors from supporting causes that challenge the political status quo. This debate could have long-lasting implications for how nonprofits participate in shaping public policy. More on this story will be continuously covered on our reports in the weeks ahead. Another new study from the Nonprofit Times reveals a sharp rise in donor concerns about data privacy and cyber threats. According to the report published just this week, 69% of donors now say they're worried their personal or financial information could be compromised when giving online. That number represents a significant increase from just a few years ago, reflecting growing awareness of digital vulnerabilities and high-profile data breaches across industries. The findings highlight a critical need for nonprofits to invest in cybersecurity infrastructure, adopt a transparent data practices regime, and to rebuild donor trust through clear communication and secure technology. The Chronicle of Philanthropy, has released its annual nonprofit technology survey, and the results point to a sector still struggling to keep pace. While most organizations recognize the importance of technology, only 27% say they feel very confident in their ability to leverage it effectively. Key challenges include limited staffing, lack of digital strategy, and gaps in cybersecurity training. Many nonprofits are eager to adopt tools like automation and AI, but without the funding or expertise to implement them safely and strategically, digital transformation remains out of reach for much of the sector. The Chronicle calls it, quote, a digital confidence gap, one that will require more than good intentions to close. Now we move on, of course, to a conversation about something a little bit north of our border. And that's a conversation with our friend in the sector, Harvey McKinnon, a veteran fundraiser, author, and the creative force behind some of the most compelling campaigns in our sector. In our conversation, Harvey speaks candidly about the Save the CBC campaign, a rapid response effort that combined urgency, emotion, and bold messaging to rally public support for Canada's national broadcaster. What emerged wasn't just a messaging success, but a case study in courage, craft, and what it takes to break through the noise. Here is our conversation. Harvey, thank you so much for being willing to talk about the Save the CBC campaign.
It's really for asking.
You've been involved in lots of different campaigns over your career. A lot of them, of course, fundraising campaigns as we would know them here in the US and around the world. But here we're talking really about a campaign about messaging, about people understanding that they have a way to ensure that the CBC continues. Why was that important right now? What was the threat to the CBC? And what is the CBC and what was the threat to it?
Well, the CBC is the national broadcaster in Canada. It's independent, but the money comes mostly from the government and then advertising. And it's unlike PBS or NPR in the States because it's much larger in the Canadian context. So it would be more like the BBC, which people would be familiar with, the British Broadcasting Corporation, where everybody gets it. Everybody grew up on the CBC in Canada. It's in every home. 80% of Canadians listen or watch CBC every week. So it's a pretty strong presence. And there was an election in Canada recently, and one of the political parties, the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, the leader, said he promised to defund the CBC, and he was raising money on this for the last 2 years, to shut down this independent broadcaster that we all grew up on and is pretty important to Canadian culture.
And you've described this in another meeting we've had earlier about the size and scope of the CBC. You just said 80% of the public is, of course, listening. Can you talk about the origins of the CBC and why it's so important?
Yeah, great question. Interestingly enough, the CBC started almost 100 years ago by a conservative government in Canada because there was so much media, radio, coming across the border into Canada. And we thought we have to, or they, because nobody is alive who was around then, we have to protect our, our culture, our interests. And so they set up this national broadcasting radio operation. And then eventually when TV came to Canada, they set up the television broadcasting. When I grew up, there were only two TV channels, the CBC and then one other commercial channel. Obviously, we have lots of them now. But CBC has maintained a special role in Canada because they employ more journalists by far than any other outfit. They produce news in smaller communities. They're often the only radio station or TV station in rural and Indigenous communities. So it's very important to our culture. So it was started by conservatives, and it's ironic that a conservative would want to kill it. The reason he wanted to kill it is because it is that independent voice. And we've seen globally over the last number of years in countries like Hungary and Turkey and India, they're suppressing the media, a little bit of that in the States too, so that they can dominate, what people hear. And so that's why they felt it was a threat, even though on CBC, they're always talking to a conservative, a liberal, and an NDP or a Green Party member when they're doing panels. So it's not as if the conservative voice is suppressed. It's just that all the voices are heard.
I know that one of the issues when people discuss public broadcasting here, and I'm sure around the world, is what is the role of the government in funding something like the CBC? How important has the Canadian government support been, and how large, how significant is it?
Well, in Canada, it's about 1.3 million for their budget, which is
Million or
billion, with 40 million Canadians. So it's somewhere around $33 per person per year. Out of the 19 nations that have large public broadcasters, we are number 17 in the funding. So it's pretty low on a per capita basis. But interestingly enough, all the countries of the world that have large public broadcasters are rated higher on inequality, they're lower on inequality, higher on citizen engagement, better educated populations, and happier societies. So it does fill a role, just like roads are public service, libraries, hospitals, public service in countries where it's not privatized medicine. The public broadcaster is the same thing. It serves the interests of the public, and that's why we were, myself, the friends, and all the people engaged in the campaign were terrified that they might shut this down forever.
And this is an effort of more than one person, although you've been involved with the CBC, I guess, in different ways over the years. How have you been involved personally with the CBC before this date, and why did you decide to take this fight on and join with others in doing it?
Right. Well, I was on the CBC a lot talking about different charitable organizations that I worked for over the years, and was a panelist on a noontime show in Vancouver for a while. And I also produced a couple of television documentaries, biographies of famous Canadians, David Suzuki, pretty well-known environmentalist, and William Shatner, who you probably know from Star Trek.
Aye, sir. Yes.
So that was 30 years ago. But I'm mostly engaged with CBC as a listener and a fan.
And this effort to come together and fight for the CBC, it sounds like the genesis of this particular effort was dovetailing with the campaign itself, with the Conservative campaign and the promise to defund. So it must have been pretty short in duration. When did it start? And can you describe a little bit about how you found the message, how you spread the message, and who else was involved and how?
Right. Well, sometime in November, December, I saw a poll that said 79% of Canadians want to keep the CBC. And even 64% of conservative voters wanted to keep the CBC. That meant the overwhelming majority of people in our country wanted to maintain the national broadcaster, yet they were campaigning to instantly defund it. So I figured that's a wedge issue. It's something they were vulnerable in. And so we used that to campaign against them because not only would they kill the CBC, but they would be attacking Medicare, reducing environmental controls, and all sorts of other things that everybody I work for, all our clients, would be not happy about. So I figured it was something where we could win on many levels.
And I know that there have been lots of public-facing folks, I mean, celebrities and others who have been part of this campaign. Can you describe some of how that happened and what role they took on? That may be instructive also for others who are trying to figure out how to navigate a public messaging campaign in their own countries.
Sure. Well, one of the things we did is we figured out that most people over a certain age grew up on the CBC. You grew up on the Mr. Rogers equivalent in Canada, the Friendly Giant, all sorts of shows that people felt, I grew up on this. We had people do videos for us saying, I grew up on this, and then my kids saw that, and then my husband and I watched this. And so it's been a lifelong thing. A lot of the radio shows, everybody knows Barbara Frum's name, David Frum's mom, actually, because she was the voice of the nation around many kind of crises in the country. And so we evoked nostalgia. We talked about how independent journalism is so important. We look at all the shows like Marketplace in the Fifth Estate where they expose corporate scams that save, literally save people hundreds of millions of dollars when people are aware of these things that are going on. And so the public service of, just delivering the weather, the traffic, information about fires, incredibly valuable for $3 a month per Canadian or less. And so we started off with that. We went to a lot of the celebrities who grew up on the CBC, Eric McCormick, Will and Grace, Colin Mockery of Whose Line Is It Anyway, the great improv comedian, Suja from Kim's Convenience, and there's a bunch of other ones. And what they did is they recorded videos of what the CBC meant to them growing up, watching the CBC, how they got their career start. Eric McCormick got his start at the CBC, as did many other people. Margaret Atwood, same thing. CBC was instrumental to building her career. And so they all were quite happy to record videos to talk about what the CBC meant and why it's so important and why we should vote against the conservatives who want to kill it.
Now,
so the politics of it depended. Some of them said, never vote conservative because they will kill the CBC. And other people just said, this is what the CBC means to me. So it was a variety.
Oh, no, that's interesting too, because when you plan a campaign, I'm sure that you want to have consistent messaging, but it sounds like you had latitude so that it was a big tent, so to speak.
It was a big, maybe it's my personality that I'm not all that disciplined, but I believe you can't have one message for all audiences. There are many different kinds of people. There are many different people in different communities who will be motivated by different messages. And the great thing with social media is you can target these messages somewhat differently. So we know that, for instance, on Facebook, when we're talking to people, the age group skews much older. So the nostalgia stuff about a Friendly Giant would be different than if you're on TikTok or on Reddit. So different audiences.
We talked about Reddit earlier and before we were taping, and I'm really interested to hear the role that Reddit played, because people often talk in the States and I guess everywhere about everything from Facebook to TikTok, but we don't usually hear Reddit as part of a campaign, whether it's a fundraising campaign, the other kinds of work that you do, or a messaging campaign. How did you choose that as a platform? How did you leverage it? And how did you work with a platform where it is kind of the Wild West in some respects?
Well, we chose it because it's an important way to reach people, especially males between 18 and say 45. That is, they dominate that compared to other channels. We have the numbers on all of these things. Same thing with TikTok. We knew we want to hit younger voters there, 18 to 24. That's where they are. That's where they get most of the news, as crazy as that is to me. So because these were where the audiences were, we wanted to talk to them in a way that would they could relate to. And it turns out Reddit is, next to LinkedIn, the most trusted social media platform. I know. Who could guess that? But people go there to ask questions, they get answers. It's something they trust. If you have particular subreddits, which say is a city-based one, you kind of get to know the personality of the moderators by what they're playing or allowing to play on the channel, if we can call it that. And so we worked with that. We had a brilliant guy who ran the program for us. We hired him full-time instantly. And we're building out other campaigns already around Reddit because it reaches probably somewhere around 12, 15% of the population, but they spend a lot of time in there and they trust it. And so I think it's a really good channel for all of us to be using. Twitter, I used to love Twitter, is a sewer now. Blue Sky, I like a lot, but it's not growing really, even though we have a big presence there. And then Facebook and Instagram, because they charge you a lot of money to reach people. You get some organic reach, but really the goal is to make money. They're great platforms in many ways, but where Reddit is more like Facebook was when we were running campaigns about a decade ago, where you could get incredible organic reach. I think our free reach was somewhere around 30 million impressions on Reddit in about a 6-week period, just in English Canada. So we, yeah, it was great.
And you were, I presume, creating some messaging, and maybe there was, again, latitude in that messaging or how people carried it. But that was that a kind of a package or a series of packages that were available then to social ambassadors, friends of? I mean, how did you go from idea to implementation?
Well, I've run different campaigns like this before. Kevin, my colleague at the company, Harvey McKinnon Associates, a brilliantly named, um, is an expert at this stuff too. So we just basically found other people. We hired a number of people part-time, 5 of us working full-time, and we just had a buffer operation going where people would throw in ideas, we'd refine them, put this on this channel, put that on that channel, adapt it to this channel. And so it was kind of a very chaotic, like 7-day-a-week process, but it worked. And then we were doing a bunch of testing in different channels on Facebook and Reddit to find out what worked best, because we are direct marketers at our core. And so you figure out what works with different audiences and you do more of it or less of it.
When we talked before, I didn't prep this question, but I'm really fascinated to know this now. As you look at this campaign, maybe in comparison to other kinds of campaigns that you've run, both messaging and fundraising, what was most surprising about the messages that worked and which didn't with something like this?
Well, one of the real surprises is one of the people we had created a message on control of the media in Canada. So in Canada, most of the daily newspapers are owned by a hedge fund in New York, and they skew pretty right wing. They attack the Liberal Party or the NDP all the time, promote the Conservatives, very oil and gas centric. They don't make much money, but they get lots of advertising from the oil and gas industry, for instance. So it's a pretty biased thing. And so somebody did a little meme which said, warning, blah, 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 these newspapers controlled by this hedge fund in New York with ties to Donald Trump. And then it had pictures of the flags of the papers, the National Post, the Toronto Sun, etc. And on the other side is the Conservative Party wants to kill CBC, an independent voice that protects Canadian interests. That's blah, 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 blah. And that went crazy viral. Millions of people saw it on Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, everywhere, and thousands of comments. So people shared that widely because it just touched a chord that if you're really paying attention to how the media operates, you knew they were pretty biased, and you could just collect headlines of attacking Mark Carney, liberal attack, attack, attack. And they were never doing that with the Conservatives. And they endorsed the Conservatives in every one of the last 7 elections in every paper with the exact same editorial. So, but it struck a chord that people know it, but is being called out. So that was a really surprising thing. Our Sujit video, the Mr. Mehta from Kim's Convenience, super viral. Colin Mockery put up his video on one of the funniest people on the planet. on his Instagram, and instantly had 250,000 people looking at it within 24 hours, and then huge other audiences on Facebook, etc. So some of the prizes were how easy it was to get many of these celebrities in a very short period of time because they wanted to do it. If we had this was a surprise election because the election was scheduled to happen in October, but Justin Trudeau resigned. Mark Carney came in as leader in a very quick leadership race and then called an election. So we weren't quite as prepared as we would ideally be because we were thinking it would be an October election. And so we had to act fast.
How,
But,
how many
fun.
days? How many days in the end did you have?
We had technically 5 weeks for the election, and we kind of saw it coming, so we had probably a week or two before that. And I started building up the Blue Sky channel in December, but just pretty casually, just going following people, that kind of stuff. But it was kind of late February when we really started doing things.
But that does speak to how if people want to wage some kind of messaging campaign, that they can do it in short order. I mean, I'm comparing now in my mind U.S. elections versus Canadian
Right.
elections, for example. And I know that every place and every culture and every political system is different. But when it comes to messaging, we all have access to these same platforms. So it's interesting to
Yeah.
hear this. Do you think that there are some lessons that we can draw in the United States from this, especially in the messaging front, but perhaps even for people across advancement, fundraising, all the different parts of the nonprofit sector, especially those who are concerned about public broadcasting? What can we
Mhm.
learn from your experience that you think is translatable?
Okay, well, there are a lot of things in there. One is the messaging, targeting the message and testing the message, I think is pretty key in any kind of channel. Second thing is that a small group of people can do these things. I've seen this happen before. I've done it before. I have other friends who've done it before. And you launch these campaigns, you think with just a little money and some passion and some experience, and you can do remarkable things. So I would encourage everybody, as hard as things can be for a lot of people in the States right now, I encourage you to take initiative and do what you can. That's really important. Jane Fonda had a great line where, it's time for courage and we have to stand up. And other people have said, what you're doing today is what you would have done in Germany in the 30s. And if you're just keeping your head low, that's not enough. We have to stand up and fight for freedoms and justice and people who are suffering. And so I think that if I have any message to people, that would be it. And for nonprofits, it's a tough time for lots of reasons. A lot of people are scared. Um, but I really believe that there's a lot of people out there who have money and want to do the right things. And if you collect a bunch of people say, this is our plan, this is our passion, we can do this, please invest in us, people will give money. I started at Oxfam 45 years ago doing emergency fundraising, and I feel like everything I'm doing is kind of an emergency, but one of the core things that make people give money is there's some urgency. And so, this is an urgent time in America. And I think, people, if they step up and even if they're not working for say they work for a totally apolitical organization, but you've got fundraising skills or leadership skills, donate that to some cause that's attacking the injustices that are currently going on.
And this is not a one and done. I mean, when you fight something, especially if it's tailored to having also a political result, and this time, I should say really clearly that you were successful. I mean,
Yes.
the CBC campaign was successful in large part because the election was successful in terms of the CBC's outcome.
Right.
So maybe you can speak to that, but then I'd also like to hear what you imagine next for this campaign to ensure that the CBC continues to thrive.
Right. Well, one of the things that made the campaign even more successful is Donald Trump's tariffs attacking Canada because people were just outraged. We've had a friendly, unbelievably friendly relationship. I have tons of friends in the States, you included, people I love, relatives, dozens of cousins in the States. And this is kind of a slap across the face to somebody you've had a long-term relationship with. So that made people even more likely to want to support the CBC and not support the conservatives who are tied in with the Republican Party using Republican consultants. And so there's that. But this will come back in the next election. So we're going to keep the Save the CBC operation going. because as a fundraiser, you never give up a list. And we've got a lot of lists and a lot of names. People want to continue doing this. And I'm not sure what the second part of it was other than the continuing, but was there another aspect to that?
Well, no, that was it. But I did want to ask you about the rest of your portfolio. So this is just a small part for people who don't know your work. Where does this fit in the whole context of all the other messaging and fundraising campaigns that you conduct?
Well, we work with a lot of national organizations in healthcare, a lot of hospitals, universities, Oxfam, Amnesty International, that kind of stuff. Then local humane societies and food banks, et cetera. So we've got a fairly robust size agency working with lots of groups. And we do campaigns. So we already have two brand new campaigns, social media campaigns we're running for big political issues. And I just had a call in between our talking earlier today. That could be a third additional one. So I feel like, well, because we're really good at this, I feel we're just going to build up our campaigning operations quite extensively over the next little while. And I'm doing some pro bono consulting in the States, but don't tell anybody.
So, Harvey, for people who want to learn more about this campaign, how it was conducted, and just the rest of your work, where can they turn?
We'll have a little write-up on our website probably in the next week or two. It's printed, but somebody hasn't put it up on the website yet. And they could send a note to info@harveymckinnon.com if they'd like to do that. And hopefully I'll get around to doing some more. I do a lot of trainings and webinars, and luckily I'm still doing them. And I will be doing this later this week in Calgary, and I'll probably do some online over the next year or so, if people ask me.
Thank you so much, Harvey. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jay.
Our thanks again to Harvey McKinnon for his sharing about the work with the Save the CBC campaign. And hopefully that's inspiring or at least informative for those of you who are concerned about public broadcasting in the US or other markets. Our next guest is someone who's been helping nonprofits make sense of digital transformation for over 2 decades. That's George Weiner, the founder and chief whaler at Whole Whale, a digital agency that leverages data and technology to maximize impact. And as you may have seen, George has been sounding the alarm on a critical issue affecting lots and lots and lots of nonprofits worldwide. And that's Microsoft's recent move to discontinue donated on-premise software licenses. According to the report in the Nonprofit Times recently, this policy change could leave many smaller and mid-sized organizations scrambling to afford access to basic tools like Word, Excel, and Outlook, things that are the basic functional tools for most of our offices. George joins us today to break down what's happening, why it matters, and what nonprofit leaders need to know and to do right now. George, thank you very much for being here.
It's a pleasure, and I'm excited to talk about this geeky tech software thing. I feel like happening in the corner, while obviously the issues you've already been talking about are taking center stage, taking up all the oxygen. This is a quiet little landmine that is coming for 400,000 nonprofits, just to put it into context, after July, and 4 million nonprofit employees. And it's just quietly being done in the corner. And so it really hit my third rail on the way it was done and the size and scope of the implications of it. And I can cover it, but I just wanted to start with the headline of this.
Well, it's good for people to understand the urgency of it. Certainly. When is this happening? What's the date for this, for the guillotine to fall?
Yeah. So to take a step back, the Microsoft grants program with Office 365 and the premium access to a lot of online tools, including not limited to security, and as you mentioned, those local apps that we all know, love, and live with on our local device. Well, that was announced with 45 days notice cancellation by Microsoft that they were then basically not allowing the renewal of that grant, which has been in place since 2013. I'll say it again. That's 12 years ago, 2013, 45 days notice to cancel this thing. And yes, there is still a discount. I've heard a lot of narratives that will be applied, but if you're a 20-person organization, you're going to be facing an extra $1,300 per year just to stay level with the foundational technology that you used to have. And I don't know about you, but there's not a lot of folks swimming with extra overhead tech budget out there in the waters when we consider the fact that 3/4 of nonprofits are operating under $1 million and far less than that.
Now, I know that some people, for to play devil's advocate for a minute, might push back and say, but now there are so many other tools in the marketplace. And Google Suite is a good example of this, that are free or appear to be free. So what would you say to those who say, well, it's only $1,300, or there are other tools available?
So there are other tools available. I'm excited for folks to be looking at this. And yes, the Google for Nonprofit program is phenomenal. And to be clear, Microsoft is still offering online apps for access under the grant. Like, that's still in play. So that's sort of parity with Google, at least with that functionality. But it's the offline apps that, yes, there's an offline mode that exists for the Google workspaces. It's just not the same, because I don't know, if you are a nonprofit that's, let's say, operating in an area that doesn't have reliable Wi-Fi or connectivity, as often many do in those hard to reach areas, I'm sorry, but you cannot be 100% online relied. It just doesn't work that way. So you, yes, can get like the LibreOffice, OpenOffice software, download that, train your entire team on using this new interface. It's not just a lift and shift. There is training. And I'll tell you what nonprofits don't have a ton of time for: retraining on core fundamental applications that have been baked into their work processes for over a decade or decades.
So how did you become first alerted to this, and then why is it a passion point for you?
Well, I got alerted to this like most folks did, this little innocuous, like one paragraph announcement, mind you, happening in the corner of the bowels of Microsoft's forums. And then this little innocuous email that goes out on May 15th to folks that is 100% sitting in people's like didn't read promotional whatever. I assume it's just about the renewal type of notice. So it's just sort of sitting there like a landmine that is going to hit a bunch of people. And it's going to hit them when they're going to be doing something critical. They've downloaded that board doc that they need to edit in time for this thing. And they're going to get that little pop-up notice that says, I'm sorry, your subscription has been deactivated. Please enter license key here. Insert confusion, insert waste of time, insert panic, insert problems that they really didn't need to have. And so what bugs me about this is that this is the world's largest company. Like, there's nobody bigger. Now, that was as of 2 weeks ago. Now they're the second world's largest company by market cap. I'm not making up facts. What precedent does this set for the responsibility of large and the largest companies that support foundational tech support? And it's de minimis the amount of revenue they're going to make off of this. There are so many more elegant, kinder, thoughtful, empathetic ways that this could have been implemented. I'm not saying this had to be free forever. You could have given a longer time frame. You could have said, hey, if you operate under $1 million, just, keep going. Because there are large nonprofits, to be honest, that get a lot of discounted value out of this. And that's fine. That's awesome. But the majority of these folks are like day to day figuring things out. So I think that confluence of thoughtless, like, attack on tech for nonprofits gets me, mostly in my head and then the rest of my body.
But you decided to take this on and really start talking about it pretty vocally. Have you had any conversations with Microsoft or anyone who has?
Well, I can tell they're looking at my posts, and I can see the engagements there. Though I've reached out, like, there's not a lot of interest in talking about it. And it's okay, because more people are coming, and they're going to come when they realize the implications of this, when they're getting those alerts.
So what are the implications, not just for somebody potentially losing this license that has been gratis to now, but or having to pay $1,300 in addition to the financial piece here? What are their alternatives?
The alternatives And they are out there. But it's not just about the fact that I can point you toward an open office solution that you can download for free and implement on your device. You're probably going to do that. I would say also begin to build a relationship away from Microsoft, who cannot be trusted now. Because guess what? That discount is not going to last. They've proven that with minimal notice, they will maximize profit. And so I would begin to look at switching if you have to do it anyway. And my background, I was the chief technology officer of DoSomething.org. I watched and was able to see firsthand the power that tech implemented properly, data looked at effectively, can have on reach, scale, and the ability of a nonprofit to simply leverage these tools. So I also know that when I switched a system, I changed over our email, I added a new application. It wasn't like just download the app. There is so much training and transition cost involved in that. And like every single tech admin, accidental techie that helps in a volunteer capacity or in a direct capacity for an organization is vigorously nodding right now and realizing like, oh no, I have to pay up or retrain or at least reconfigure this entire system and spend God knows how much time, which is money, which has a real cost for organizations to handle something that frankly they shouldn't have to be dealing with.
Well, let's take a step back. I think maybe this is also a way of thinking about nonprofit tech infrastructure as a whole, right? And one is the dependency on not just Microsoft, but other software platforms and other kinds of tech that people use, and some of which is relatively inexpensive, or it seems that way to some. And others are very, very pricey, and they require a lot of human capital, right, to implement and to maintain. So where are we in terms of nonprofit tech infrastructure? So taking it aside from one company for a moment, albeit an important one, are organizations doing what they need to do to be prepared for events like this, changes in the marketplace?
The lens I look through for technology inside of an organization breaks down into people, process, and product. And actually, it's in that order of priority. The people in the organization, and then how they are using the step-by-step process, the payments, the forms, the interactions with community, and then the product. I end up being fairly product agnostic most of the time, right? If you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. It's about the implementation of this with people, process, product. That said, we are increasingly seeing AI as a side of fries, like AI being bolted on, added on, and then as a per seat cost added to the tech expenses that continue to balloon for the SaaS landscape, software as a service landscape, and sort of expected expenditure for, nonprofit operations. So tech costs are increasing. That said, there are, when implemented properly, definite savings to be had with some of this newer tech that I see that may actually streamline a lot of, I think it feels like sometimes half of what nonprofits deal with is just paperwork, like grant in, grant app, grant, like nonstop. AI can help so much with the summarization and pieces like that, but all of those things are coming with a per seat cost. And you're picking teams right now, you're getting freemium being like, hey, here's this free thing you can use. Oh wait, we have all your data now and you want to do something useful, that's going to cost you. So there is like a lot of these traps out there right now I see in software land. Not to mention the risk of rug pull, right? The rug pull, this idea of something being taken away that your team has depended on, built into the people and process of the organization, which has real cost in the training and transition.
We were talking a few minutes ago about storing the Nonprofit Times and a survey. I think it was done actually by Independent Sector, but the coverage of how nonprofits still are behind when it comes to tech. So that's true right now with access to some of these tools. And it will probably be true no matter what happens as Microsoft delivers this message and other companies also deliver theirs, because as you said, AI is something that's being built in, bolted to things, and therefore the costs are going to be built in to everything that people utilize, since everything now is being powered by AI. So for organizations that are trying to be prepared for the future, what is your advice to them about ways to make sure that they are prepared for a different kind of tech reality, one that's not just one that they can decouple from the internet?
Yeah, the head in the sand moment is long gone. I would say one of the interesting ways to frame that question is to actually do a true cost audit of your tech. What does that mean? Is there a volunteer, a board member's son who's like helping you with that website, with that thing, with that implementation? Oh, do we get those free seats for our Salesforce database? Like, you should just do an accounting of how much tech are we getting for free, like the raw cost, and also the labor. And this is just glossed over. Oh, we'll get some volunteer to do it. Like, you should acknowledge that those, even though like in-kind hours are different and how you do, you should do a sort of tech accounting of how much stuff are we getting for free right now, and then look at the people in process. What is the level of critical to operation that our dependence on these free tools has, and just to come up with a strategy. Because I've been getting these like, oh, well, whatever. I'm playing on LinkedIn and I deal with a lot of trolls. And one of the common refrains is it serves these nonprofits right for depending on free tech. And aside from the sort of victim blaming like mentality, let's just toss that to the side. I want to come back to the fact that let's do the inverse. Wouldn't it have been terribly like wasteful for the organization not to take advantage of, by the way, a grant that was in play for a decade? Right? Would it be like, oh, I can't take advantage of the Google ad grant, 10K in kind per month in advertising because I'd rely on them? It would be viewed as wasteful and silly by like organizations. Like, why are you paying for it? They're giving it away for free. And so that same argument basically falls on its face. So I don't fault nonprofits for taking advantage of these free offers
Right.
at all. Like, you're doing something smart. And we want that sort of tech accounting of stuff we rely on that's free, people we rely on that maybe we pay or underpay or don't pay, and where that balances in and be like, that's a liability on your book. It may not show up on the 990, but thoughtful leaders probably need to start looking at that.
I wonder if there's a kind of an inverse of this that we're not exploring, which is that, as you said, the Google ad grant has been there for people for a long time.
Correct.
For a very long time, Facebook also made certain things available that are no longer. And now Microsoft is making this decision, at least it seems to be. Is there an argument to be made, sort of the opposite of the troll argument, that more companies should be giving their stuff away? And if so, how would you be able to rationalize that? What would your argument be to the sector that instead of cutting things back, making things cost more, that they should be making them more affordable and in fact, maybe just giving them to the sector?
Yeah, the nonprofit tech programming, I feel like it had like definitely there was like a boom period of time. We are definitely on the like the downslope right now. I think some of the headwinds financially, right, when companies are being tightened, strained through various administration changes on a whim, like when the purse gets tight, like the first thing usually to go are the free services offered to nonprofits and those types of tech assistance. I think, frankly, if you're in the, if you're in the Fortune 100, if you are in the, many billions of dollars, certainly if you're in trillion, like you should have a robust nonprofit program. I was just at the Social Innovation Summit in San Francisco, and I saw a lot of great companies still standing up, still writing checks out there to nonprofits and supporting them in ways that align with their corporate mission, vision, and values. I think there's two categories really of that. There's the in-kind world, and then the like, let's philanthropically write checks and directly support. I care much more about the in-kind because that gets into offset costs, into like adoption, and it's like that's a deep relationship that has to be taken a touch more seriously.
Wow, actually, yeah, that's something good to explore, because there's been a big change in CFR over the last, oh my gosh, 10, 20 years. What is the role of a company in terms of giving back or giving it all? And what is corporate social responsibility? So what you've just said is that role of course, just making these things available for the sector is maybe more important than giving. But is that really an offset? I mean, is it enough to just give product when they could also provide the volunteers, because those are becoming more scarce, provide cash, which is so desperately needed? I mean, what are the things that you think that companies should be doing today for the sector, as well as what the sector should be doing?
I mean, frankly, never turn down the check in that sense of like, yes, if they're going to write it, but you can't depend on something like that. I mean, I think when I watch those checks get written, I get really worried sometimes about like the deflection marketing elements of like, we're giving you this money in order to speak good of us, to cover up, to greenwash, to rainbow wash, to insert wash categorization here. I get a little bit more nervous about that. I like more so for a company, when it's possible, certainly may not always be, to actually go ahead and say, hey, here is the core service that we offer. Here is where our area of brilliance is. And by the way, we give away X% or massive discount for the nonprofits that qualify. I do want to be clear. I paint with a wide brush, but just because you have a 501c3 does not mean you are doing good in the world or good that aligns with the company. So yes, have like your various tiers in place. And then from the volunteer side, I think, there is a bit of a myth that like every nonprofit could just use more volunteers tomorrow. Like they could use more volunteer coordinators for sure, but there are many folks out there willing to raise their hand. My wife helps run Bring Change to Mind, and they just worked with Deloitte the other week, and they had a whole day of volunteering, and like it's a lot of work to put on. It was amazing. It helped them think it through, but that was a Friday. Today is Tuesday, and we still have work to do. And I still need to download this stupid Microsoft app to solve my problem or figure out a solution.
So what, as you think about all this as a business person yourself, with Whole Whale, what does this make you think about the role that you have as a company? Because you're not Fortune 100 yet, but
thank you so much for the yet.
But
give me another 10 decades.
But how does that impact your thinking about the services that you provide, how you charge them, how you work with the sector? I know you're very committed to the sector. So I'm not challenging any of that, but of course, all these things that are happening in our environment make us rethink every day. What is it that we could do better? How is that influencing your thinking?
Yeah, and I want to say there's really great, like 1% for the planet, 1% pledge. Those folks very active out there, pulling in, inviting in, calling in, not calling out, calling in the folks that we want to participate. All great. For Whole Whale, we've been a B Corp for, over 5-6 years. I forgot when we officially applied, but continue to be part of the B Corp community, which is great. Double bottom line built into our structure. We offer actually with causewriter.ai, our AI platform, free GPT tools, like suites of GPT tools custom built for nonprofits for free. There are little like instructions I've given it being like, don't be evil, don't help people that seem like they're doing bad things. I could probably put more guardrails on it, but I want more nonprofits playing with these tools. That's been free for 2 years now. We try to put out free content that tells people exactly how to do things like their own, full funnel fundraising strategies. But we're small, right? We're like a 24-person company, and we're doing what we can. But I look at organizations that just have immense capabilities, and I'm watching a lot of these programs get cut, and sometimes it's for political reasons and wins that may be, and sometimes it's for other internal cost-cutting measures, and it's just sad when it's first to go, last to know for nonprofits when it comes to those types of specifically in-kind tech software support.
So, George, just a couple last questions. One is, what do you expect? What would you like to see come from the kind of campaigning that you're doing using tools like LinkedIn, where you're talking about this? Do you hope to just poke the bear, or do you actually want the bear to do what it should do? And then after that, I'm curious to know if you were to give a piece of advice to those in the sector who are going to be impacted by this, assuming it goes forward. What would that one piece of advice be? But let's start with, what do you think the best outcome could be.
Yeah. So, put another way, why have I chosen every single day, nonstop, incessantly to talk about this issue? Because it's touched my third rail as somebody who has seen firsthand what technology means. I have lived in the shoes of that technology admin that supports organizations, and I just know the level of headache this comes. I know the budgets. I've done the math. I know that it's like a third of a small nonprofit's literal tech budget to do this sort of thing, which is massive, which means they can't invest in the types of AI projects that they probably should be doing. So I am pretty charged up about that. And also, I've realized that the universal we of the sector has been so much been taken by the expected types of big beautiful bill problems, the issue of the day. And if you're always challenged and being challenged and fighting the issue of the day, you miss the larger war that should be being paid attention to. And I have chosen this little hill and this little plot of land to make as much noise as one human can make. And so I think I'm not going to stop doing this. And I'm just going to get louder and more creative. My other goal is to reach 4 million folks. I'm up to about 200,000 in terms of measured impressions. So I'm going to reach 4 million just to sort of net out, because 4 million nonprofit employees are potentially impacted by this little, sorry, your license key is gone. And by the way, your security is also gone during an increased time of AI attacks on your organization.
And George, but I understand getting that number of eyeballs can be really important for messaging. What do you hope will happen as a result of increasing the volume and getting those eyeballs?
A rational response, an extension of this timeline. They've given 45 days, even less. I want an extension. And ideally, the hope is saying, guess what? If you're under $1 million in operating revenue, just leave it be. They're so small. There's no upside to doing this to them. It hurts them disproportionately. Go make your money off of the massive, I get it. There's probably billion-dollar organizations on that list being why are we doing this? Just a hair of change on that.
And then for the nonprofits that are going to be impacted by this, assuming it goes through as written, the 45 days, what do you advise them to do right now?
The ideal case would be to find the date of your license cancellation. Know when that date is, because bad things will happen if that date passes, included not limited to deletion of data that is actually stored on the cloud. If you don't update, go through your account and set that up. And the worst time to be doing that is when everything has gone sideways, because that is your entire tech infrastructure. You're going to want to plan for that. My ideal case scenario is go with a company you can trust right now. Trust is earned, and I believe that Google for Nonprofits has earned that and has dealt honestly when it comes to fair deprecation when it has to come in play, and marry that with a LibreOffice or OpenOffice solution, which are download apps that you can then handle your offline docs should that be necessary, and make that change. Deal with the headache and sort of cut bait on Microsoft if they're not going to, because guess what? In 1 year when they need to tighten it again, that discount is going to get reduced, and you'll get squeezed and squeezed until you're in an even tighter box.
Well, we'll see how Microsoft responds to all this, and hopefully nonprofits impacted by it will find a path to making that a little more manageable. Thank you, George, very much for sharing on this today. Really,
thanks for giving air. Thanks for giving air to it, and I'm happy to share more rants when and if needed.
Well, we'll let you know. We can always use a good rant here. So thank you very much to George for sharing that. You can learn more about all of that, of course, just by following him on LinkedIn, among other things. And of course, you can check him out at Whole Whale. Now, I want to let you all know about what's coming up in the series. On June 12th, you can join us for our How to Raise session with board engagement expert and author Hardy Smith. If you've ever been frustrated by boards that resist fundraising, you're not alone. Boy, are you not alone. And you don't want to miss Hardy's session on getting commitment for board member fundraising. It's drawing from his CFRE approved course and his book, Stop the Nonprofit Blame Game. So you can check all that out. That's coming up just this Thursday. And then next Thursday, the 19th, we welcome Erica Wasdorp, one of the sector's leading voices on recurring giving for how to raise long-term ongoing revenue through monthly giving. Those are 2 sessions in our How to Raise series for those CFRE credits if you're gathering those up. And don't forget, you can check out new episodes of the PM podcast and Frontlines of Social Good, this show, are always just around the corner. To register for any of those live sessions, just visit the website of our very generous sponsor, DonorSearch, the leader in the responsible AI and donor research solutions market for the nonprofit world. You can check all that out, as well as recordings of all these sessions at DonorSearch.net under the resources tab, or check out their YouTube channel. So until next time, thanks very much for spending time with us. We'll look forward to seeing you soon. Till then, take care.